Shipbuilding is the construction of ships and other floating vessels. It normally takes place in a specialized facility known as a shipyard. Shipbuilders, also called shipwrights, follow a specialized occupation that traces its roots to before recorded history. Shipbuilding and ship repairs, both commercial and military, are referred to as naval engineering. The construction of boats is a similar activity called boat building. The dismantling of ships is called shipbreaking. History. Prehistory archaeological evidence indicates that humans arrived on Borneo at least 120,000 years ago, probably by sea from the Asian mainland during an Ice Age period when the sea was lower and distances between islands shorter. The ancestors of Australian Aborigines and New Guineans also went across the Lombok Strait to Sahul by boat over 50,000 years ago. 4th millennium BC evidence from ancient Egypt shows that the early Egyptians knew how to assemble planks of wood into a ship hull as early as 3000 BC. The Archaeological Institute of America reports that some of the oldest ships yet unearthed are known as the Abydos boats. These are a group of 14 ships discovered in Abydos that were constructed of wooden planks which were sewn together. Discovered by Egyptologist David O'Connor of New York University, woven straps were found to have been used to lash the planks together, and reeds or grass stuffed between the planks helped to seal the seams. Because the ships are all buried together and near a mortuary belonging to Pharaoh Khafre. Originally they were all thought to have belonged to him, but one of the 14 ships dates to 3000 BC, and the associated pottery jars buried with the vessels also suggest earlier dating. The ship dating to 3000 BC was about 25 meters, 75 feet long, and is now thought to perhaps have belonged to an earlier pharaoh. According to Professor O'Connor, the 5,000-year-old ship may have even belonged to Pharaoh Aha. 3rd millennium BC. Early Egyptians also knew how to assemble planks of wood with tree nails to fasten them together, using pitch for caulking the seams. The Khufu ship, a 43.6-meter vessel sealed into a pit in the Giza Pyramid complex at the foot of the Great Pyramid of Giza in the 4th dynasty around 2500 BC, is a full-size surviving example which may have fulfilled the symbolic function of a solar bark. Early Egyptians also knew how to fasten the planks of this ship together with mortise and tenon joints. The oldest known tidal dock in the world was built around 2500 BC during the Harappan civilization at Lothal near the present-day Mangrol harbour on the Gujarat coast in India. Other ports were probably at Balakot and Dwarka. However, it is probable that many small-scale ports, and not massive ports, were used for the Harappan maritime trade. Ships from the harbour at these ancient port cities established trade with Mesopotamia. Shipbuilding and boat-making may have been prosperous industries in ancient India. Native labourers may have manufactured the flotilla of boats used by Alexander the Great to navigate across the Hydaspes and even the Indus. Under Nearchos, the Indians also exported teak for shipbuilding to ancient Persia. Other references to Indian timber used for shipbuilding is noted in the works of Ibn Jubair. 2nd millennium BC. The ships of ancient Egypt's 18th dynasty were typically about 25 meters in length, and had a single mast, sometimes consisting of two poles lashed together at the top making a shape. They mounted a single square sail on a yard, with an additional spar along the bottom of the sail. These ships could also be oar-propelled. The ocean and sea-going ships of ancient Egypt were constructed with cedar wood, most likely hailing from Lebanon. The ships of Phoenicia seem to have been of a similar design. 1st millennium BC. The naval history of China stems back to the spring and autumn period of the ancient Chinese Zhou dynasty. The Chinese built large rectangular barges known as castle ships, which were essentially floating fortresses complete with multiple decks with guarded ramparts. There is considerable knowledge regarding shipbuilding and seafaring in the ancient Mediterranean. Early 1st millennium AD, the ancient Chinese also built ramming vessels as in the Greco-Roman tradition of the trireme, although oar-steered ships in China lost favor very early on, since it was in the 1st century China that the stern-mounted rudder was first developed. This was duly met with the introduction of the Han Dynasty junk ship design in the same century. Archaeological investigations done at Portus near Rome have revealed inscriptions indicating the existence of a guild of shipbuilders during the time of Hadrian. Medieval Europe, Song China, Abbasid Caliphate. Pacific Islanders Viking longships were an advancement from the traditional clinker-built hulls of plank boards tied together with leather thongs. Sometime around the 12th century, northern European ships began to be built with a straight stern post, enabling the mounting of a rudder, which was much more durable than a steering oar held over the side. Development in the Middle Ages favored round ships, with a broad beam and a heavily curved at both ends. Another important ship type was the galley, which was constructed with both sails and oars. An insight into shipbuilding in the North Sea, Baltic areas of the early medieval period was found at Sutton Hoo, England, where a ship was buried with a chieftain. The ship was 26 meters long and 4.3 meters wide. Upward from the keel, the hull was made by overlapping 9 planks on either side with rivets fastening the oaken planks together. It could hold upwards of 30 men. The first extant treatise on shipbuilding was written c. 1436 by Michael of Rhodes, a man who began his career as an oarsman on a Venetian galley in 1401 and worked his way up into officer positions. He wrote and illustrated a book that contains a treatise on shipbuilding, a treatise on mathematics, much material on astrology, and other materials. His treatise on shipbuilding treats 3 kinds of galleys and 2 kinds of round ships. Outside medieval Europe, great advances were being made in shipbuilding. The shipbuilding industry in Imperial China reached its height during the Song Dynasty, Yuan Dynasty, and early Ming Dynasty, building commercial vessels that, by the end of this period, were to reach a size and sophistication far exceeding that of contemporary Europe. The mainstay of China's merchant and naval fleets was the junk, which had existed for centuries. But it was at this time that the large ships based on this design were built. During the Song period, the establishment of China's first official standing navy in 1132 AD and the enormous increase in maritime trade abroad allowed the shipbuilding industry in provinces like Fujian to thrive as never before. The largest seaports in the world were in China and included Guangzhou, Quanzhou, and Xiamen. In the Islamic world, shipbuilding thrived at Basra and Alexandria. The dhow, felucca, bagla and the sambuk became symbols of successful maritime trade around the Indian Ocean, from the ports of East Africa to Southeast Asia and the ports of Sind and Hind. During the Abbasid period, at this time islands spread over vast distances across the Pacific Ocean were being colonized by the Melanesians and Polynesians, who built giant canoes and progressed to great catamarans. Early modern. With the development of the carrack, the West moved into a new era of ship construction by building the first regular ocean-going vessels. In a relatively short time, these ships grew to an unprecedented size, complexity and cost. Shipyards became large industrial complexes and the ships built were financed by consortia of investors. These considerations led to the documentation of design and construction practices in what had previously been a secretive trade run by master shipwrights, and ultimately led to the field of naval architecture, where professional designers and draftsmen played an increasingly important role. Even so, construction techniques changed only very gradually. The ships of the Napoleonic Wars were still built more or less to the same basic plan as those of the Spanish Armada of 2 centuries earlier, but there had been numerous subtle improvements in ship design and construction throughout this period. For instance, The introduction of tumble home, adjustments to the shapes of sails and hulls, the introduction of the wheel, the introduction of hardened copper fastenings below the water line, the introduction of copper sheathing as a deterrent to shipworm and fouling, etc. Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution made possible the use of new materials and designs that radically altered shipbuilding. Iron was gradually adopted in ship construction, initially in discrete areas in a wooden hull needing greater strength. Then, in the form of plates riveted together and made watertight, it was used to form the hull itself, initially copying wooden construction traditions with a frame over which the hull was fastened. Isambard Kingdom. Brunel's Great Britain of 1843 was the first radical new design, being built entirely of wrought iron. Despite her success, and the great savings in cost and space provided by the iron hull, compared to a copper-sheathed counterpart, there remained problems with fouling due to the adherence of weeds and barnacles. As a result, composite construction remained the dominant approach where fast ships were required, with wooden timbers laid over an iron frame. Later, Great Britain's iron hull was sheathed in wood to enable it to carry a copper-based sheathing. Brunel's Great Eastern represented the next great development in shipbuilding. Built in association with John Scott Russell, it used longitudinal stringers for strength, inner and outer hulls, and bulkheads to form multiple watertight compartments. Steel also supplanted wrought iron when it became readily available in the latter half of the 19th century, providing great savings when compared with iron in cost and weight. Wood continued to be favored for the decks. During World War II, the need for cargo ships was so great that construction time for Liberty ships went from initially 8 months or longer, down to weeks or even days. They employed production line and prefabrication techniques such as those used in shipyards today. The total number of dry cargo ships built in the United States in a 15-year period just before the war was a grand total of 2. During the war, thousands of Liberty ships and Victory ships were built, many of them in shipyards that didn't exist before the war, and they were built by a workforce consisting largely of women and other inexperienced workers who had never seen a ship before. Worldwide shipbuilding industry. After the Second World War, shipbuilding grew as an important and strategic industry in a number of countries around the world. This importance stems from the large number of skilled workers required directly by the shipyard, along with supporting industries such as steel mills, railroads and engine manufacturers, and a nation's need to manufacture and repair its own navy and vessels that support its primary industries. Historically, the industry has suffered from the absence of global rules and a tendency towards overinvestment due to the fact that shipyards offer a wide range of technologies, employ a significant number of workers, and generate income as the shipbuilding market is global. Shipbuilding is therefore an attractive industry for developing nations. Japan used shipbuilding in the 1950s and 1960s to rebuild its industrial structure. South Korea started to make shipbuilding a strategic industry in the 1970s, and China is now in the process of repeating these models with large state-supported investments in this industry. Conversely, Croatia is privatizing its shipbuilding industry. As a result, the world shipbuilding market suffers from overcapacities, depressed prices, low profit margins, trade distortions and widespread subsidization. All efforts to address the problems in the OECD have so far failed, with the 1994 International Shipbuilding Agreement never entering into force and the 2003 to 2005 round of negotiations being paused in September 2005, after no agreement was possible. After numerous efforts to restart the negotiations, these were formally terminated in December 2010. The OECD's Council Working Party on Shipbuilding will continue its efforts to identify and progressively reduce factors that distort the shipbuilding market. where state subsidies have been removed and domestic industrial policies do not provide support in high labor cost countries, shipbuilding has gone into decline. The British shipbuilding industry is a prime example of this, with its industries suffering badly from the 1960s. In the early 1970s, British yards still had the capacity to build all types and sizes of merchant ships, but today they have been reduced to a small number specializing in defense contracts, luxury yachts and repair work. Decline has also occurred in other European countries, although to some extent this has reduced by protective measures and industrial support policies. In the USA, the Jones Act has meant that merchant shipbuilding has continued, albeit at a reduced rate, but such protection has failed to penalize shipbuilding inefficiencies. The consequence of this is that contract prices are far higher than those of any other country building ocean-going ships. Present-day shipbuilding. Currently, South Korea is the world's largest shipbuilding country with a global market share of 41% in Q1 2015. South Korea leads in the production of large vessels such as cruise liners, supertankers, LNG carriers, drill ships, and large container ships. In the third quarter of 2011, South Korea won all 18 orders for LNG carriers, 3 out of 5 drill ships and 5 out of 7 large container ships. South Korea's shipyards are highly efficient, with the world's largest shipyard in Ulsan operated by Hyundai Heavy Industries slipping a newly built $80 million vessel into the water every 4 working days. South Korea's big 3 shipbuilders, Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries, and Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, dominate global shipbuilding, with STX Shipbuilding, Hyundai Samho Heavy Industries, Hanjin Heavy Industries, and Sungdong Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering also ranking among the top 10 shipbuilders in the world. In 2007, STX Shipbuilding further strengthened South Korea's leading position in the industry by acquiring Aker Yards, the largest shipbuilding group in Europe. In the first half of 2011, South Korean shipbuilders won new orders to build 25 LNG carriers, out of the total 29 orders placed worldwide during the period. Japan had been the dominant shipbuilding country from the 1960s through to the end of 1990s, but gradually lost its competitive advantage to the emerging industry in South Korea, which had the advantages of much cheaper wages, strong government backing and a cheaper currency. South Korean production overtook Japan's in 2003 and Japanese market share has since fallen sharply. China is an emerging low-cost, high-volume shipbuilder that briefly overtook South Korea during the 2008 to 2010 global financial crisis as they won new orders on medium and small-sized container ships. However, Chinese shipbuilders suffered a severe slump recently due to the flagship bulk ship market deteriorating in 2015. Analysts say that Korea and Japan were able to perform relatively better than China, given the two nations back high-performance ship technology than the latter. The market share of European shipbuilders began to decline in the 1960s as they lost work to the Japanese in the same way as Japanese builders have lost work to South Koreans more recently. Europe's production is now a tenth of South Korea's and is primarily military, although cruise liners and some cargo ships are still built in Italy, Finland, France, Germany and Denmark. The largest shares of the European shipbuilding market belong to Germany, Italy, Norway, the Netherlands and Spain, which accounted in 2010 for over 70% of total deliveries by the yards. This activity accounted in 2010 for 1.5% of European GDP. Over the 4 years from 2007, the total number of employees in the European shipbuilding industry declined from 150,000 to 115,000. The output of the United States also underwent a similar change. Modern shipbuilding manufacturing techniques. Modern shipbuilding makes considerable use of prefabricated sections. Entire multi-deck segments of the hull or superstructure will be built elsewhere in the yard, transported to the building dock or slipway, then lifted into place. This is known as block construction. The most modern shipyards pre-install equipment, pipes, electrical cables, and any other components within the blocks, to minimize the effort needed to assemble or install components deep within the hull once it is welded together. Ship design work, also called naval architecture, may be conducted using a ship model basin. Previously, loftsmen at the mold lofts of shipyards were responsible for taking the dimensions and details from drawings and plans and translating this information into templates, battens, ordinates, cutting sketches, profiles, margins and other data. However, since the early 1970s, computer-aided design became normal for the shipbuilding design and lofting process. Modern ships, since roughly 1940, have been produced almost exclusively of welded steel. Early welded steel ships used steels with inadequate fracture toughness, which resulted in some ships suffering catastrophic brittle fracture structural cracks. Since roughly 1950, specialized steels such as ABS steels with good properties for ship construction have been used. Although it is commonly accepted that modern steel has eliminated brittle fracture in ships, some controversy still exists. Brittle fracture of modern vessels continues to occur from time to time because Grade A and Grade B steel of unknown toughness or fracture appearance. Transmission temperature in ships' side shells can be less than adequate for all ambient conditions. Ship repair industry. All ships need maintenance and repairs. A part of these jobs must be carried out under the supervision of the Classification Society. A lot of maintenance is carried out while at sea or in port by ship's crew. However, a large number of repair and maintenance works can only be carried out while the ship is out of commercial operation, in a ship repair yard. Prior to undergoing repairs, a tanker must dock at a debore lasting station for completing the tank cleaning operations and pumping ashore its slops.